Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another edition of Against the Odds. So last week on our Against the Odds poll, we had an all Aether Revolt edition of Against the Odds poll, and in a surprise upset, it was Indomitable Creativity, the new red mythic, coming out on top. So this week, we are heading to Aether Revolt Standard to see if we can cheat some things into play with Indomitable Creativity. Of course, if you want to vote for next week's poll, which is all Aether Revolt version 2 with a bunch of new additions, make sure to follow the link in the description of this video to the article on the website. There's a poll in there, so make sure to vote for that for what deck we're going to play next week. Anyway, a quick reminder before we break down the deck. If you enjoy Against the Odds and the other series here on the channel, it would be super awesome of you if you could take a quick second, click that subscribe button down in the corner of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So let's talk Indomitable Creativity. So the card itself is essentially a mass polymorph split card almost, except it has a lot of red mana in it. But basically, you destroy X artifacts or creatures, and then you get that many creatures and or artifacts from your library in a random manner. So you reveal cards till you hit an artifact or creature, it goes on the battlefield. It's actually a semi-challenging card. The challenging part of Indomitable Creativity is it creates this deck building restriction, because you don't just want to play it randomly. If you just play a normal deck and play Indomitable Creativity, you might end up with some random 1-drop or some useless artifact on the battlefield, which isn't worth it when you're paying 4 mana at a minimum and more if you're trying to get multiple things at once. So it's basically a deck building restriction where you don't want any other creatures except for your Indomitable Creativity target. You don't want any other artifacts except for non-artifact, non-creature permanents that'll put an artifact or creature on the battlefield, like token generators, to enable Indomitable Creativity. And that way you can make sure you get exactly what you want with Indomitable Creativity every single time. So in our deck, we have one target, and that is Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. So it might seem weird to only have a single target, but I'm pretty sure that Ulamog is just far and away the best thing you can get. Like, the problem with playing multiple Indomitable Creativity targets, let's say we played an Ulamog, a Kozilek, and a Void Winnower, you never know what you're going to get. So maybe you're pretty confident your opponent has an Unlicensed Disintegration in hand, which means you really want an Ulamog because your opponent can't kill it with Unlicensed Disintegration because it's indestructible. You cast your Indomitable Creativity and you get your Kozilek and everything goes wrong. Or a Void Winnower and everything goes wrong. So by only having one target, we can kind of control what we're going to get with Indomitable Creativity, and that's kind of the entire goal of this deck. Is we're not trying to cast Indomitable Creativity X7 and get a bunch of random things. We have one goal, and that goal is to cast Indomitable Creativity for 4 mana, so X equals 1, destroy one of our artifacts, get an Ulamog on turn 4. And if we get an Ulamog on turn 4, hopefully that'll be enough to close out most games against most decks. There's a few decks that have answers to Ulamogs, To the Slaughter, Stasis Snare, maybe Declaration in Stone, but the number of decks that are playing answers to Ulamog, especially in the main deck, are pretty small right now. So how do we enable Indomitable Creativity? And these cards might look familiar from last week, but we're on the Clue token plan, so press for answers, Jace's Scrutiny, help keep us alive in the early game, but more importantly, they're 2 mana, get a clue. And that clue is an artifact, so it's a way we can have an artifact in our deck to sack to Indomitable Creativity or destroy with Indomitable Creativity that doesn't actually impact our cascade effect with Indomitable Creativity, because they're not artifacts actually. So we get a clue token, we destroy it on turn 4 with our Indomitable Creativity, turn that clue token into an Ulamog, and hopefully win the game. The rest of the deck is pretty straightforward blue-red control. So the challenge of winning with Ulamog is kind of twofold. I already mentioned that some decks, a minority, a small number, have answers to Ulamog. Those are very bad for us. The other thing that can go wrong with Ulamog, even on turn 4, is if we play really aggressive decks that can kind of go wide with a bunch of creatures. If they have Winding Constrictor into Rishkar, into, I don't know, Walking Ballista, or some combination of those cards, and they have 3 or 4 creatures on the battlefield, they're all pretty big, we get an Ulamog, there's a decent chance that even though we have an Ulamog, our opponent can just win by kind of suiciding their entire team into the Ulamog, killing us that way. So we have a lot of early game removal. So over the first 2 or 3 turns, while we're waiting to set up Indomitable Creativity into Ulamog, we're killing our opponent's stuff, because if we can get an Ulamog down on a relatively empty board, it's going to be really hard to lose. So Shock, Harness Lightning, Radiant Flames, just straight up kill creatures. Aether Meltdown is kind of a shout out to the Mardu Vehicles deck. It stops a Heart of Kiran in its tracks, stops an Aether Sphere Harvester, very good against essentially any vehicle. Since it enchants it, gives it -0, -4, it can't really attack, it can't really block well against Ulamog anyway, so it more or less is a 2-mana removal spell that gets vehicles, can also throw down a creature if need be, so it's never really a dead card in any creature matchup. Then we have some Glimmers and Anticipates, and these just help us find our combo pieces, find our removal, pretty straightforward. If we're looking to have a clue token and an Indomitable Creativity as early as possible, being able to kind of cycle through our deck, make sure that we can do that as often as we possibly can. And then Disallow is a way to protect our Ulamog in matchups where our opponent can kill it. So they have the 2 the Slaughter or something, we can kind of wait until maybe turn 7 to get our Ulamog, leave up the Disallow, or sneak in the Ulamog, wait for our opponent to kill it, counter it. Also, just a fine answer to things that our other removal doesn't get, like Planeswalkers, for example, other non-creature permanents, Aetherworks Marvel, Saheeli Rai, all that kind of stuff. In the mana base, bunch of dual lands. We have a little bit of white mana. It's primarily to power up our Radiant Flame, so we can cast a X3, get like a Depala or something. Also, a little bit of sideboard action. Wandering Fumarole, creature land, otherwise just regular duels, a single Highland Lake, some islands, some mountains. In the sideboard, we get a bunch more counters, so these are helpful in controlling matchups, in removal heavy matchups, so even if decks don't have To the Slaughter, don't have Declaration in Stone or Stasis Snare in the main deck, there's a decent chance they might have an answer to Ulamog or 2 in their sideboard, and our negates, our dispels can help fight against those. Confirm Suspicions also gives us clue tokens, so if we're playing a matchup where our opponent doesn't have many creatures for us to target and get that initial clue to sack to Indomitable Creativity, Confirm Suspicions, it gives us a way we can get a clue token without our opponent really playing creatures. We can also do a cool trick where we activate our Wandering Fumarole to target it with one of our clue things just to get the clue for Indomitable Creativity, so we do have some ways to do it even though we don't have any other real creatures in our deck. And then Dispel and Negate also help force through our Indomitable Creativity against counters. If our opponent's going to be using Disallow and Negate to keep us from resolving Indomitable Creativity, 1 mana, 2 mana from Dispel and Negate can make sure we force through our game-ending combo. Fevered Visions also helps against control decks. This card can just beat control decks by itself, play it on turn 3, slowly ping our opponent's deck 2 at a time while we're drawing extra cards, removal, counters, our combo to close out the game. Fragmentized is our white card in the sideboard, really good against the vehicles decks, helps in other matchups as well. Release the Gremlins, gets a whole bunch of artifacts, more Radiant Flames for mass removal, and then this one was sort of a mistake. So as I was building the sideboard, I was like, oh, Deadlock Trap is pretty good at shutting down Planeswalkers, I kind of like it. We have some random energy we're not using with Glimmer and maybe Harness Lightning, so we have the ability to activate it repeatedly, so it's like, it seems like a fine sideboard option. It was not till I started actually playing with the deck that I realized that it's an artifact, which means we can't have it in our deck. So I left it in here so we could talk about it because it is in the deck in the videos, but don't actually play with this card because the problem is you bring it in, you Indomitable Creativity to get your Ulamog, and all of a sudden it's a Deadlock Trap instead, and you're very sad. So it shouldn't be in the sideboard. That was a mistake on my part, but I wanted to address it so you knew what happened. Anyway, that's our Against the Odds deck for this week. Indomitable Creativity for Aether Revolt Standard, and I think this deck is pretty sweet. It's not super crazy. We're not trying to cast Indomitable Creativity X8 or something to get a bunch of random stuff. Instead, this is a super focused, super consistent build of it, where we have that one goal of getting an Ulamog on turn 4, and the rest of our cards, apart from the clue token makers, to make sure we can get an Ulamog on turn 4, are built around making sure that Ulamog is good enough to win the game. So really, this is kind of like a polymorph deck. You see these polymorph decks in Modern, they're fringe, but play a couple Emeralds, play a couple token generators, you polymorph for 4 mana, turns into an Emrakul, win the game. This is basically what we are trying to do. Another kind of model for this would be the blue-red Madcap experiment decks that we have in Modern, where you are essentially doing the same thing, except instead of paying a bunch of life to get a big artifact, we have to get a clue on the battlefield and we don't have to pay life, but still it's another 4 mana, get a huge thing out of your deck type card. So those are kind of the models that we are built after, except we're in standard, and I think the deck is actually going to be pretty reasonable. Is it going to be great? No, probably not, but I think it's going to be passable. We got good removal. We got a good game-ending finish. The format looks relatively soft to Ulamog right now. There's not a ton of Stasis Snares and To the Slaughters running around like there were when Emrakul was in the format, and everyone was fighting against a creature that was really hard to deal with other types of cards. So because Emrakul's gone, there's actually less Ulamog removal too, which means our Ulamog's more likely to win the game. The question's going to be, can we beat the aggro decks, or can they just go wide enough that Ulamog doesn't really matter? So we'll have to see on that, but I think this one's actually going to be relatively good. Like, it seems like a good deck with a good finish and a great way to abuse Indomitable Creativity. So anyway, that's our Against Odds deck for this week. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoy the gameplay videos, and I will talk to you soon.